in the series of the Workwell webinar. This is part of our Building the Movement programme, so welcome everyone. Many thanks for joining. We're delighted to be holding this webinar with Jayne Carrington today from Right Management. Jayne is a really fantastic and active member of our leadership team and has worked for over 25 years within the NHS and preventative healthcare industry in a number of diverse roles, including general, clinical management, sales and marketing, and research and development. She joined Right Core Care, I think as it was, in 1996 and was promoted in managing Managing Director in 1999. Jayne is currently Managing Director for Right Management and is a member of the Institute of Directors, Chartered Institute of Marketing, EABA, and a consultant to the regional NHS Improving Lives Task Force. Nice to have you taking part in this webinar, and over to you, Jayne.
Oh, thank you very much, Grace. I hope everybody can hear me well. First of all, can I just say in this wonderful age of technology, for the convenience of all, could you either put your phones on mute or *6, whichever your phone system will allow? That means that you've got privacy if you do need to cough or somebody comes into the office. I think we're all probably in various locations. So if we could do that, that would be great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Grace, for that nice introduction. It is an absolute pleasure to be part of the BITC Workwell, and I gain as much as I hope I give in terms of the wonderful people that I sit around the leadership team with, and the great work that is done. And some of that I hope to weave into the presentation today. We've got an hour, but I think listening to somebody in any capacity for an hour is quite a lot. So the presentation today is not timed, but I plan to speak for around about 45 minutes, allowing some time at the end for Q&A, because I think it's important to hear your feedback and your perspectives as well, if you can take that on board. So, without further ado, I'm going to take us into an overview of leadership in the human age, but with an accent on developing and leading a healthy and productive workforce, something that I'm very passionate about. I had the privilege last Friday to be at Portsmouth University Business School with quite a diverse group of individuals, and we were talking about innovation in the NHS. We were talking about the whole new ecosystem out in the marketplace. We were talking about how important leadership is today more than ever in driving productive and healthy workplaces, and again some quite nice insights from various speakers on Friday, including somebody that talked to us about the work that he was doing with Bono and Bob Geldof and David Cameron in terms of aid in Africa. And again, what he was talking about there was the importance of leadership and taking a risk, doing something different. And I think never has there been a time that we are facing today, the human age, as Manpower have called it, that we need to do things differently. So for me, the agenda today is that I'm delighted to be here and to share some of the insights from around the world of work as we see it, and the interactions that we have with our clients. So I'm coming at it today very much from a practitioner, commercial perspective, not so much perhaps as a recipient of these services, more as somebody that is talking to clients and helping them with their challenges. I think we would all agree today, and the ones that are attending the call probably more than most, that there are some real powerful forces shaping the world in which we work today more than ever. And I think this is compelling leaders to ask some very difficult questions about their talent strategy. And when I look at talent strategy, I'm talking about the whole spectrum of talents, from skills, from attracting, from retaining, from developing, from looking after. So that whole agenda really around talent.
Helen Kane.
Irrespective of the geography, the size, industry, people are still, in my personal view, the most valuable asset. In fact, people and property, two biggest costs on the balance sheet, I say as an MD. And there's never been a more challenging time for business leaders and governments and academia. As I say, business school. In the audience, we had some sixth form students from grammar school, and we were just trying to educate them into the world of work as they will see it in the next 10 to 15 years' time. Those are the things I'd like to cover. The human age, what's going on today, the situational analysis, the wellness imperative in its broadest context, and then, as I say, hopefully some time for some Q&A, and really a look at what that means in practice with a spotlight on the socio-economic competitive advantage of having healthy, productive and engaged employees. I work for the Manpower Group. Right Management is part of the Manpower Group. We're a global organisation, and this slide is not an advert. I put this slide up really as a rite of passage, I guess, to talk to you today, but also to share with you the breadth and depth of the Manpower Group and the amount of clients that we talk to on a daily basis. We actively manage over 400,000 clients across the globe, from massive strategic businesses to small businesses alike, private and public sector. And we know from our research, we know from the work that we do, we know from our client insight that the world of work has rapidly changed, and we've invested quite a lot in research and that outside-in perspective over the last few years. The world economic growth continues to shift considerably south and east in our perspective. Emerging markets currently represent about 39% of world GDP. And by 2020, these markets are projected to represent 52% of GDP. More importantly, 70% of projected global output and growth is between now and 2020 is going to come from those emerging markets. So we really have to understand what borderless workplaces, what cultural diversity, what leadership in times of cultural and human age really look like for organisations. China is now the primary trading partner with every country in the world, and interestingly, of the last decade, 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing nations were African nations, which is quite significant. Not only do we rely on our client insight to drive our business perspectives and help our other clients by sharing best practice, we also partner with a number of different research institutions to validate what
now joining.
We actively develop knowledge collaborations and strategic partnerships with thought leaders and academics and innovators to obtain, as I said earlier, the outside-in perspective and really what's going on within the world of work and what's unfolding now and next, so that we can help our clients prepare for that. We work with, for example, Preston at London Business School and Lenny Mendoka from McKinsey's in the States. So we do regularly partner, and in fact, one of the new propositions we've just launched to market around strategic workforce planning, we included all of these partners and some large clients in that debate. This is quite an interesting slide here from Peter Drucker, who we will all know, and it's very relevant, I think, today. The question that faces strategic decision makers is not what this organisation should do today for tomorrow. It's
now
what
joining.
we have to do today to be ready for an uncertain tomorrow. And, at the end of the day, we know that businesses is powered by talent. That's what the human age is about. It's unlocking and unleashing human potential. And leaders who lead in that different way, who are connected to their employees, who connect passion and purpose of their business. So we know that then the values and the mission and vision of the organisation becomes something that's wrapped into the business strategy and the talent strategy, and is underpinned by that planning and the way that they manage and lead their business. Could I just ask again for all to go on mute, please, or *6, so that because this is being recorded today for the pleasure of others. So that's very kind. Thank you. Success in this country will depend on growth, and this will require jobs being created.
Now joining.
Heather Lee. People being skilled and inspired about the world of work, innovations developed, high streets regenerated, suppliers supported, and new enterprises being created. The new leadership challenge is to balance the urgent priorities today while understanding that this is in a period of transformational change. So we've talked about the human age. And really, what does that mean? Is it just a new rhetoric? Well, actually, we believe it's more than that. We believe that in the past, human ingenuity and innovation led to new technology and a way of organising the world that transformed it. Previous eras were defined first by raw materials that transformed them: stone, iron, bronze. And then they were characterised by the domains people conquered with ever-improving technology. These are industry and space and information. Now, however, it will be human potential itself that will be the catalyst for change and the global driving force behind it, economically, politically and socially. As we can see here, talent, as capital once was, is becoming scarce. And I can show you some data to support that in a moment. A corporation's means of attracting and mobilising and liberating that talent will be a competitive differentiator. How often do we hear, I've been headhunted, I'm having to go out and poach talent from others? We need to start thinking more about how we grow, how we develop and retain what we've got without paying superior prices for other people's talent. Human potential will be a major agent of economic growth. In fact, human potential also is wrapped up into brand, and we know again from research that good, strong brands outperform weak brands in a downturn by 3 to 1. And a brand often is made up of the way that the organisation is led, its values, how it goes about its business, as opposed to just what its business is. So brand and talent strategy are very much intertwined. And really it's about how to unleash the level. Our ability to tap into the passion, the creativity and innovation of our human potential will determine whether we're able to adapt to this new reality. As human potential becomes so vital, the source of that potential, the skilled talent in our organisation, or indeed in a nation, has access to and will become that key differentiator that we've just discussed. Capitalism will shift to talentism. And when we were at the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago, we actually launched talentism and the human age as new concepts within the world of work, and we've seen that being reproduced and reshaped by other people in some of their communications, which is nice to see. How do we know that? Well, we know that really because a significant population growth in emerging markets will continue to shift the current world order, with China and India likely to be the first and third biggest economies by 2050. Developed economies will be faced with an aging and a shrinking population, and this is already changing the profile, the ownership and leadership of businesses around the world. 1.39 billion baby boomers are eligible to retire by 2030. I heard recently that that's 35,000 a day. 75 million young people worldwide. We hear about the lost generation in our own economy here in the UK, and what do we need to do to get those individuals, that talent, that rich source of human potential into our own businesses. 38 million plus more high-skilled workers will be needed by 2020. 23 of those in China alone, 23 million of those. Okay. 20 million plus workers, however, are without the skills that employers will need in 2020. And 1.5 million people will work virtually by 2015, and that's not very far away. And virtual working obviously has its own set of how we engage and manage our staff. So what's changed? We're talking about skills, we're talking about the human age, we're talking about skill shortages. Let's have a conversation around that. Employees old enough to retire now outnumber teen workers in the US for the first time in 60 years. And by 2020, more than 36% of the country's population will be older than 65. As I say, by 2020, more than 18 million baby boomers will be at retirement age in Europe. And by 2030, more than 632 million baby boomers will reach its retirement age across Asia. In terms of the demographics and that talent mismatch, those are just two of the world of work trends that we went out to market with a couple of years ago in terms of 4 major world of work trends that are facing businesses today and the challenges. And I'll come on to each of those in turn over the next few slides. For most of the 20th century, the assumption was that the working age population would continue to grow, and this formed the basis of our workforce planning. We thought that there was going to be a rich supply. However, this assumption simply no longer holds. Most countries around the world are experiencing a significant decline in the rate of growth. For example, the US population has gone from about 60% growth in the past 40 years to now about half of that. And as you can see here, the UK is showing flat growth over the next few years. In the UK, we're talking to organisations about what are they doing about retaining older workers and what are they doing about attracting older workers. And what we see is only 14% of employers have specific strategies to actually go out and seek and recruit older workers. and only 21% of organisations have actually strategies in place to retain their older workers, and we'll come on to that a little bit more in a moment when we look at some of the other demographics. We know talent shortage is a big issue for many employers, and again, through our own research, we are told that 34% of employers today are still struggling to fill the jobs that they desperately need, and that's causing that talent mismatch. The amount of talent needed to sustain economic growth is rising, both qualitatively and quantitatively, a trend that is forecast to create significant talent gaps by 2020, and that's according to the World Economic Forum's paper in 2011. And it's really the pressure to find the right skills in the right place at the right time. 10 of some of the highest in-demand jobs today didn't even exist 10 years ago. So we know cloud computing, for example, a cloud computing engineer in the US, I'm told, reliably can charge up to $500,000 a year. These are new jobs to support new ways of working. And clearly, as economies start to rebound, holding on to our talent is critical. So we have to do more to look after the talent we've got and not just rely on that war for talent when we can headhunt and take and retain our staff from others. Here, if we look at that talent mismatch in sort of another way, the dark blue box shows the skills that are in demand. So this is the skills that the employers tell us that they want. And the light blue triangle shows the supply of skill that is available. So an oversupply of low or wrongly skilled resources continue to generate underemployment and unemployment. And organisations are looking for different skills, new skills. We have what we're called hyper-specialisation. So many organisations now have got very specific, highly specialised roles, and it's how universities and governments and schools and education processes, how are we meeting each other's needs to make sure that there is a supply of this talent source into the future. So don't be fooled by today's unemployment rates, as it's actually, we can see that there's an oversupply of some talent and an undersupply of certain skills that are needed. And across the globe, a variety of demographic developments have led to too few people with the right skills. Just a few stats here of interest. Italy will lose 28% of its population by 2050. From 2011, 10,000 baby boomers will turn 65 every day for the next 19 years. Young people are twice or three times as probable to go to be unemployed as adults. With 45 million new entrants into the global job market annually, most of them young, 300 million new jobs will be needed between now and 2015 to keep pace with the the pace for growth in the labour force. In North and West Africa, more than 1/4 of the population is under 15, and unemployment rates for young people exceed 30%. And to ease the shortage, developed countries will continue to offer incentives to older workers to postpone retirement and remain in the workforce longer in order to maintain adequate levels of skilled talent. And in some emerging countries, skilled expatriates may be lured back home by opportunities resulting from economic fueled by foreign and direct investment. So, some stark reality there in terms of today and tomorrow, in terms of that planning that Peter Drucker was talking about. Just to see it really in graph terms, we talked about the 34%. That's down to the manpower talent shortage survey, which we can send to you after the call today, or it's available on the Manpower website. But in the UK, you can see that's 11% of employers telling us that they're having difficulties filling jobs, and 81% in Japan. And of that, when we asked, okay, so what jobs are you having difficulty filling, these are the top 10 jobs employers are saying to us that they have difficulty in fulfilling. Skilled workers moved to the top of the list from third place last year, and technicians dropped from first on the list to fourth. Engineers remain a high demand population, and we do know, and I was talking on Friday to a couple of local employers who've now got their own universities, and they're developing individuals with the right skills, and they're calling it teachable fit. So they're looking to what skill sets they have within their own business to be able to fill jobs that they can't fill outside of the business. And I think what this data does is helps leaders and HR teams to identify their own skill gaps and consider future workforce planning as a priority. because it may be in 2, 3, 5 years' time, and we know businesses usually plot their strategies 3, 5 years' time. Where are we going to get the skills to fill the jobs that we're going to need today and tomorrow? And the shift in strategic focus from capital to talent is putting business performance results at the door of the human resource leaders, and success will be measured by an ability to unleash that human potential that we've been talking about. Shaped by macroeconomic forces, we also know that 84% of respondents, and we're talking about individual choice here, and that the rise in one size fits one, as we've coined it, are looking to leave their jobs up from 60% in 2012. We heard recently at a conference somebody talk about being dug in, so employees are not leaving their current employer yet, but soon will leave as soon as their prospects improve. So what are we doing to make sure that we do retain? Do we know who the flight risks are? Do we know what our key roles are in our businesses? Only 21% of engineering students, going back to what I was just saying about engineering still being the second highest in demand job, only 21% of engineering students intend to pursue an engineering related job, while 25% were not going to and 54% were unsure. Babies born today can expect to work for 60 years, and their work life will be totally different. We know technology is having a huge impact on how work is done today. There'll be more women executives, and we've certainly seen an increase in that agenda, quite rightly so, over the last few years. And their focus will be many and long. We're talking to many organisations about how are you managing people with portfolio careers that may give you 2 days a week or 3 days a week of their time. So how do you apply that investment in learning and development? How do you manage somebody with a portfolio career? All of these things we're having to grapple with as we look for new and creative ways. So we know Gen X and Gen 1 want a different workplace experience from baby boomers.
Now leaving.
We are seeing more demand for portfolio careers in our organisations, a greater emphasis on CSR and responsible business practice. Trust in leaders, I think, is probably at an all-time low. And this does really require a new way of leading and managing. And we are talking to business schools about how to incorporate the EQ, the emotional intelligence, as well as the IQ into those curriculums, and really starting to prepare tomorrow's business leaders to take a different view and a different leadership style in the human age. So that all of those things really come under the banner of the one size fits one, or the individual choice. Ageing population is another significant concern for many employers today. It's certainly a major concern for the World Economic Forum, and I'll come back to that in a moment. By 2050, most G7 countries and all the BRICS except India will be as aged as Japan is today. And remember, we said Japan had an 81% issue around trying to fill jobs. As baby boomers retire, countries will not be able to compensate workforce losses through immigration and expected birth rates. And therefore, it's really showing through, in terms of some of our conversations, that employers are starting to think about the needs and concerns of their well-being of their older workers. Because whilst people are living longer, and I think I saw recently a report to say that the human body is now capable of living up to 125, all health trends are not positive, and I'll come on to that in a moment when we look at some of the trends around lifestyle. Some real issues for us that we face. This is quite a nice pictorial because it shows the different generations. Interestingly, if you think about it, the first category, 5.7, those are the individuals that designed most of our workforce models that we work with today. And yet, if we go to the other extreme of that chart, these are the individuals, the ones born in 1980 and so on, are the leaders of today and tomorrow, so will shape the future forces of our workplace. The other thing to think about here is often organisations have up to 5 different generations co-locating in the workforce. How do we communicate with those different 5 generations? They all have different needs, views, perspectives, cultural, economic and social requirements of work. Do we really make sure that the alignment model, the discussion with those individuals, meets individual need as opposed to mass customization, which I think we've been probably guilty of in the past? I think another one of the World of Work trends has been technology, and how quick technology has shaped and changed the way that we do things today. And, you know, at the end of the day, 6 billion, and this is an estimate, 6 billion subscribers in 2011 going up to 7.4 billion mobile subscribers in 2015. And we know that that technology does create collaboration. It gives organisations work to be performed in different ways. But technology is both a labour-saving device, but it also creates some pressure in the 24/7 world of work. And certainly in multinational organisations like my own, I can be on a conference call at 5 o'clock in the morning, or I can be on a conference call at midnight to take into account the different time zones of some of my colleagues. Work intensity, work-life pressures, these are sometimes magnified by the blurred boundary between the demands, challenges and the rewards of work. So, you know, we have to embrace technology, but we also have to remember that it does create speed and transparency. And sometimes, you know, with Twitter and other of those types of social media available to us, we as leaders have to think about what we say and do, because it's immediately in the public domain. I was being told I was being tweeted as I was presenting at the University of Portsmouth on Friday, which was quite interesting. Going on from technology, we see our customers being much more sophisticated in their wants and needs, and also in their business models. Globalization today is the norm, not the exception. Productivity and innovation require leaders to focus on their talent strategy to deliver their business strategy, and the two are not mutually exclusive. With employers trying to reduce cost and accelerate the performance of the organisation, they are looking for more creative ways to turn competitive advantages into realities, and the workforce, for many in the service industry, is certainly one of those. Our customers have access to more information, more experts, and a lower cost base, which increases the visibility and the subsequent pressure on them to deliver greater value. And we're certainly seeing that in the consumer market that we belong to today. Leading in the human age is an era of complexity, and we think about this in three different primary levers within the workplace. One of those is the practices, and then the talent sources. So how do we need to look differently at the way work is structured? How can we leverage the new talent ecosystem to drive productivity? How will we accommodate a diverse and ageing workforce? What new practices will we need in order to attract and retain that talent? Do we know what talent we need? Have we thought about our business in terms of next year, 5 years' time, 10 years out? And what motivates those different generations that will work for us? Why do they come to work? What gets them out of bed in the morning? And how will our leadership motivate and drive those behaviours? And do we know our talent supply options? Do we talk to our local universities? And is government doing enough to support us in that talent supply? In terms of educational partners, in terms of becoming an educational factory, as I was talking about a couple of employers on Friday, home growing their talent. Tapping into underutilised pools such as the older worker, women, men looking for more flexibility, industry, migrants, and identified adjacent skills, that teachable fit that I mentioned a few moments ago. If we have a role, do we have individuals who have the right attitude, qualifications, intelligence to be able to take on new roles in our workforce? So the talent pool really needs to be thought about in a different way. And as we're seeing across both the private and the public sector today, transformational change and reform have become accepted and expected, and it's a part of our everyday life for our individuals, our employees, companies, and for our governments. Time for planning will continue to shrink, and business leaders will need to focus on strategic agility in the face of uncertain headwinds. Even more importantly, that HR helps them create the business strategy and the talent strategy to meet the now and the next. So this in turn requires all business leaders to rethink the way organisations understand and address and manage talent. Successful organisations will create flexible workforce strategies aligned to those business strategies to boost productivity, to build resilience. That's a word that we're seeing more and more as organisations want resilient employees, those that are agile, those who are change ready, and then to drive exceptional performance and results in ever-changing circumstances. These are big challenges that we know keep some of our clients awake at night. So in short, this period of certain uncertainty does require a new way of leading and thinking. So it's about going from mobilizing work to mobilizing knowledge, from directing workers to engaging colleagues and helping them problem solve and create and develop new skills. That one size fits all is now that one size fits one. What is in it for me? What do I want and offer this employer, and what does it offer and give me back in return and want from me? That task alignment to conceptual alignment, creating different models of work, tightly defined jobs, this is my job, this is what I do, to flexible, purposeful teams, so that people are almost Velcro. They can be detached and attached to different projects and teams in different times. And that outside-in perspective versus that inside-out perspective, so constantly looking at what others are doing and sharing best practice. I heard on Friday a pharmaceutical company that now, whereas before would have put their failed research trials in the bin, now they give them to smaller research companies to say, look, this is a research trial that went wrong. This will help you because you don't have to go through these painful steps. And I felt, what an enlightened and liberated way of having, going about your business, that you're brave enough and bold enough to be able to do that. We know that work is organised in different ways now, and the talent pool looks drastically different to the one perhaps that we're used to, and it's more contemporary and contingent. We've got different component parts, so we have strategic consultants and partners, we have permanent workers, we have the crowdsourcing. A lot of organisations now will throw a problem out into the crowd and get thousands of responses back, and sometimes that work is given then to the best idea to solve that organisation's problem. Again, going back to one of the benefits of technology. So at either end of that new architecture of work requires perhaps different and new working models, and certainly different people practices. If I turn now, just whilst we've got another 15 minutes or so, if I just turn to something that I think is very important for me to raise onto the agenda today, because all of that is absolutely fine and makes sense, I'm sure. But one of the things that I think gets lost along the way is employee well-being. And employee well-being is not just the absence of illness or disease. It's not just about absenteeism or presenteeism. Employee well-being is about energy, and it's about attitude and engagement. The World Economic Forum produced a paper last year, and it cited three main inhibitors to economic growth. One of those was ageing. We've looked at that already today. The other is NCD, or non-communicable disease, so lifestyle diseases particularly, and I'll come on to that in a moment, and then the talent shortage. So that's, that was a call to action at the World Economic Forum, with all of the greatest and good in terms of our business leaders and thought leaders in the world coming together. And it's a very powerful report, and if you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend. It's a good read. The world of work is changing. I think that's a given. And that means that it's a different conversation with business leaders to recognise that employee health is an investment and not a cost. I was in the States last year at a conference when one large pharma company talked about, in the US alone, how they spend £484 million alone in healthcare cost, and how they were starting to try and be more proactive and encourage people to take much more care and interest in their own health and well-being, and rewarding them accordingly to do that. So no organisation, in our view, will be successful without globally competitive, healthy and productive people. A few things that we're seeing, just to perhaps overlay that with some of the examples of conversations that we've had recently. There's the so-called sandwich generation, made up of working-age adults with both childcare and elder care responsibilities. I read somewhere recently that we're going to spend more time looking after our parents than we do our children. 2.3 million people in the UK have left jobs to care for disabled, sick or elderly relatives. Again, going back to talent, what are we doing to help carers in the workplace? Many, many more people have financial worries. We are an EAP provider, and we've certainly seen a spike in the last 12 months around individuals who are struggling to meet their financial obligations. And that's not just individuals on lower pay. These are individuals on significantly higher pay as well. And we know that breaks down relationships. It creates concerns for people at work. It actually can cause presenteeism, where people are at work but not focusing and concentrating because they have other worries. And we know that work intensity has increased, employers trying to do more with less. The wellness continuum, I think, sort of, if you like, puts it into context quite nicely, because if we do nothing today around our employee well-being, people will get older.
Now leaving.
They will develop signs and symptoms. They will become ill. They'll go into the chronic disease bucket, and that's a high cost and low productivity. So what we try and talk to our clients about is really raising awareness, letting people know what their health risks are, what their work-life balance issues are, and help to educate, inspire and support them so that they make those behaviour changes so that the continuum goes in reverse and it's lower cost and higher productivity, which stands to reason. And there's been a huge amount of research and debate in the last couple of years. There's a few papers here that absolutely show that this is a big problem for government, for countries, as you can see there with the issue in Ireland, the World Economic Forum paper that I mentioned, and the wonderful MacLeod and Clark paper around how employee engagement and well-being are so inextricably linked. And we know good employers that focus on employee engagement and well-being do reap those rewards, both in terms of brand, in retention, and often in terms of business results. So one organisation that focuses on KPIs for managers around their employee engagement and well-being scores, very clearly are seeing that as a competitive advantage. So these advance the debate. They give it relevance and currency. They enable us to take these papers and these case studies to our finance directors and to the decision makers. 63% of annual deaths every year in people in working age population are due to lifestyle disease, NCD, cancer, stroke, diabetes, stress. These are all major concerns for us. 75%, I think it is, of illness is lifestyle, not genetic. NCDs do limit capacity and they cause absenteeism and impact on productivity. And 170 million working days are lost in Great Britain alone due to people being ill to go to work, and that was a TUC paper reported at the beginning of the year. So with people living and working longer, the burning platform for employers is how do we keep these people well? How do we motivate them to take much more interest in their own health and well-being? How do we create cultures of empowerment versus entitlement? Because I think for sure in our lifetime, the NHS, which is a laudable and wonderful institution, is going to crumble under the burden of trying to cope with all of these NCDs and in addition to everything else that it has to deal with on a daily basis. So we have to encourage people to take a much more enlightened view to health and well-being. And actually, BITC work model is a really good benchmark or way of doing that. And BITC's work well model was the first model to successfully integrate the individual and the organisational perspective in one succinct strategy. It supports creating the conditions for the whole person to flourish. It's been created by business for business, so it actually does work. It's based on really good practice. And in the inner circle, we have some of the determinants that need to be in place to create that effective health and well-being strategy. The grey circle are those things that individuals need to take responsibility for themselves. And the outer circle are the things the organisation can benefit by way of output, so productivity, brand, better recruitment. We all know those good employers that have good brands and people want to go and work for them, and that brand constitutes a fair and equitable way of working, good learning and development, good consumer confidence. They're successful and they attract the high net worth individuals. All organisations, in my view, can be better at that by adopting different work practices as we look at the ageing population, the shrinking talent supply, and some of the other things we've already shared this afternoon. So I think the BITC Work Well model is a very, very good one and very simple to articulate. And we know some of the best business leaders, certainly on the BITC leadership team, have embraced this own Work Well model in their organisations. I think the business case is actually quite clear. I think we can see case studies in abundance of good organisations that are doing good work in employee engagement and well-being and can see that overall link to performance and productivity. Towers Watson in 2011 cited that 66% of companies with effective health and productivity programs believe that they perform better than their competition, so they are seeing it as that competitive advantage. And the most common strategic objective for workplace wellness initiatives is to promote employee health and support engagement, whilst at the same time benefiting from the secondary outcomes of improved productivity, reduced absenteeism, reduced presenteeism, lost days off work, and so on. And those are measurable. I think we've become more sophisticated in our management information activities, and we can really show that we can produce return on investment and value for money for the organisation through this. And I think it's okay not to have all the answers. Some of the research gives us good insight, it gives us good case studies, but I think the important thing is to start to do something, because as Dee Eddington, who's at the University of Michigan, says in his really good book called Zero Trends, he talks about the cost of doing something is less than the cost of doing it. We go back to that wellness continuum. If we do nothing today, we will get older, and in terms of the way that we age and sometimes lifestyle diseases that are consistent with age, we're not, if we don't do anything, we are going to go towards that ill health and chronic illness. So research and papers do help to advance the debate, but we also need to turn the conversation into action. And I think one of the difficult challenges is to make something intangible, which sometimes I think well-being can be, into the tangible. So starting with what is the cost of spend now, what is the cost of absence, what is the cost of all of our programs that we spend on, are we spending the right money on the right things, do we know our unidentified health risks, do we map engagement data with health and well-being data to get an understanding of what the workplace is doing to contribute or to damage employee well-being and health, and some of that data is available with good tools and programs in place. Call to action, I guess, really is we've seen over the next 2 decades, NCD will cost significant amount of money to both the public purse, to businesses, and to governments alike. So it is a socio-economic, I think, imperative. Healthcare is significant in its cost to us as employers, whether that's private or public, in terms of the way that we manage health and well-being through absenteeism, presenteeism, through medical insurance and inflation, and through replacement of staff that are off long-term sick, etc. And our workforce is ageing and our talent is scarce. And there are some very clear benefits to be gained by having better employee health and well-being strategies in place. I turn really to another good source of insight, which is Harvard. And in 2010, they went out and conducted some research looking at a number of different well-being programs that were already in place. And they came up with these 6 pillars, really, of things that they felt needed to be in place for any organisation to have a successful wellbeing programme. The first is leadership, and we've talked about that quite significantly on the call this afternoon, and multi-level. So yes, having somebody at the front of the business, leading by example, being a good role model, but also operational leadership, because often we hear operational saying, I can't do that, that's in the too difficult bucket, I can't release people off their workstations. But actually, if we can inspire operational leaders to recognise that the long-term gain is worth the short-term pain, I think that's another level that we need to get to, including managers. Alignment, making sure that any wellness program is aligned to the business strategy, understands what the talent needs are of the organisation today and tomorrow, that it's relevant, that it's of high quality. I think that that's another important facet, and also that it's engaging and it's fun. It has relevance and resonance to those individuals. It's not about a preach, and it's not a fad. It becomes something that's embedded. Making it easy for people to participate, making it accessible, using different medium and different ways of accessing the support. Using a collaborative approach, so using the supply chain, using external experts, developing internal experts in terms of wellbeing champions and so on. So developing that collaborative approach. And above all and importantly, I think, is the way that it's communicated. So it's inclusive, it's diverse, it's creative, it uses different medium. And that really it overcomes individual apathy, because sometimes health and well-being, people say, well, that's my personal responsibility, my personal business. Becomes the business interest if somebody obviously is not performing, or there are ill health issues, or the organisation knows that they have scarce talent. Again, going back to the conference last year, one organisation told us that they can't just go down to the job centre to bring in one of their paper specialists because it takes 10 years to actually develop and train a paper specialist in their organisation. So that supply of new talent is not available if that person were to be off sick suddenly with health and wellbeing issues. So I said I would speak for about 45 minutes, and it was untimed, but thankfully I've hit the mark. Leading in the human age requires exceptional qualities, and a few of those are instilling trust, demonstrating creativity, navigating ambiguity, respecting beliefs. And in developing tomorrow's leaders, we must also impress upon them the importance of employee health and engagement and investing in talent for the long run. I'm going to stop now and unmute, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any observations, comments or questions, because I would be very, very happy to take those. Thank you so much for listening and for your time this afternoon. You may need to unmute if you do have a question.
Now leaving,
Heather Lee.
In that case, all it remains for me to say again is thank you so much for joining BITC and myself this afternoon for the webinar. It is being recorded. It will be posted on the BITC website and indeed on our own. And I hope to connect with you all at some point in the near future. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Jane. It's Grace here. I just wanted to
now leaving,
I thought that was an interesting presentation, so thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
now leaving,
Leanne Oliver.
Paul Kaner.